Welcome to Advocate Today. I'm Aaron Dean. It's called the Classic Learning Test, or CLT, and in Florida, it's being offered as a potential alternative to the SAT or the ACT as a college entrance exam. Florida could become the first state university system to accept CLT. The test is already popular among conservative political groups and Christian schools. It is currently accepted by 250 colleges and universities. This is the latest confrontation between Florida Governor Ron DeSantis and the College Board, which administers the SAT and advanced placement classes. The governor's conservative Department of Education has blocked a new AP course for students in African American studies, saying that it lacks educational value. And the GOP-led legislature has removed some LGBTQ+ topics from the classroom. Well, it looks like more Americans now believe that the Supreme Court should have an ethics code. Unlike other federal courts and the executive and legislative branches, the Supreme Court does not have a code of ethics. According to a recent UMass Amherst poll, about 90% of Americans say that the Supreme Court should have a formal code of ethics. Only about 10% said it should not. Surprisingly, according to another poll conducted by Marquette University Law School, Republicans are more likely to say the justices have high honesty and ethical standards, 55% compared to 16% of Democrats. Senior staff to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton are testifying against him at his impeachment trial. Paxton is being impeached for abusing his office and letting a friend and conservative donor dictate courses of action. Paxton's whistleblowers say that the office had been hijacked.
I was deeply concerned that the name and authority and power of our office had been, in my view, hijacked to serve the interests of an individual against the interest of the broader public.
And the fact that he had invoked the use of a grand jury to try to help Mr. Paul in his investigation, what level of concern and why was that a bother to you?
It was unconscionable in my view.
Now, they go on to say that Paxton often instructed deputies to draft legal opinions that benefited the friend and donor in question. They also say that Paxton hired an outside attorney to investigate their business rivals. The trial is expected to last 2 to 3 weeks. Children's books and novels are being banned at alarming rates. Conservative groups are launching campaigns against books that cover topics like identity, diversity, and even science. Rajani LaRocca is an award-winning children's book author and physician. She says it's important that normal, everyday topics are digestible for young audiences. Why children's books? What is it about, children and learning that made you say, you know what, I want to write books for kids?
So I think the books that made the biggest difference in my life were the ones that I read when I was a kid. And, as somebody, so I'm Indian American. I grew up in the 70s and 80s in Louisville, Kentucky, which is a lovely place to grow up. And I was a huge reader, as I said, but I never saw any stories that were about people like me. Not in the US and not in India, where my family was from and where, we would visit every few years. I never saw any stories about Indian Americans. And so when I grew up and started writing, I thought back to the kinds of stories that I loved when I was a kid and started writing stories like that. But then I realized over time that what I really wanted to do also was to write about people like me, so that I felt that kids who are like me would see themselves in those books.
Yeah, representation is very, 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 very important. And, children's books have become a point of contention in many parts of this country. Unfortunately, governments are dismantling lessons and they're banning books that focus on diversity and inclusion on many different levels. And as a children's book author, what is your feelings about all of this right now?
Well, okay. So I will say that as an adult, I think sometimes I can take the long view and say, you know what, this is a cyclical thing that that our society does from time to time, where it's like people get a little crazy and they try and ban books as if that's a good thing. But as a writer and as a parent, it's really concerning to me because we can't let fringe elements, because honestly, that's what they are, determine what constitutes good literature for children. So many of the books that are banned are award-winning, amazing books, right? And there's nothing questionable in them. And it becomes clear that the real motives of these people who are banning books is to silence certain voices, people of color and LGBTQ people, and it's a shame. So I do believe that we're going to come back around again, and I do think that for example, the court system is saying right now, like, they can't do this, they can't ban books like this. But I also think that people who believe in letting children have access to all the books that they need, we just need to stand up for what's right. We need to make our voices heard as well.
Like we're talking about, you have written books that represent your community, so that people that look just like you will have someone to read about. What are young people missing out on when it comes to diversity and inclusion, when they ban books like this? What are they missing?
Well, what they're really missing out on, which is kind of sad, is the real world, right? We don't live in a world where everyone looks the same or comes from the same background or, has the same type of family, right? And we live in a world that is full of diversity. And so when you ban books for children that really demonstrate the true diversity of the world in which we live in, you're putting them at a disadvantage. I would argue that it's more important for children to read about people who are not like them than to read about people who are like them. So that's what you're really eliminating when you ban books.
And like you had mentioned, you are a working physician as well. You're an author. You do a lot. Can you share with us about how books and inclusive education have a great impact on the future of our young people?
I just shared a story in which a nonfiction book, a picture book, made a huge difference in my life. And it just got me excited and interested in science. So I hope that some of the books that I write spur that kind of interest in kids. I think that their books, serve a lot of functions. One is to educate, but also to entertain. If you can read a book as a kid and feel that you're in a different world and see things from a different perspective and learn empathy, that is such an amazing, valuable skill to have because it makes you a better person and it makes you able to deal with the world around you in a much better way. So I had 2 nonfiction picture books come out that are both on medical topics. One is called A Vaccine is Like a Memory, and it is all about the history and science of vaccines, how they work and why they're important. That's the one, it's over here in black, there you go. And then I have another picture book called Your One and Only Heart, which is written in poetry, and it is about the human heart and how it works and why it's important. And so I hope that both of those medical books find the right readers and maybe inspire some kids to be doctors someday.
Kind of wrap things up, it really does seem like you're not afraid to talk about and tackle certain topics. Like you said, like the book about vaccines, that's been a topic that has ruffled feathers for years now. And then even talking about anxiety, why is it so important for you to tackle those things and make sure that children get educated in a fun way?
Yeah, so vaccines have been something that's been important to me as a doctor for a very long time. I know that of all the medical achievements that have happened over centuries, this is probably the most important one in terms of preventing illness and keeping people healthy. So I wanted kids to understand why it is we have to get these shots and what they're about and why they're helpful to us. And I also, they're like a memory, right? It's like giving us a memory of a disease that we never had. And the other thing I wanted to do, which is play on that idea, is that we can't forget as a society what things were like before we had vaccines. It was pretty terrible. So I wanted to do that in a fun and interesting way. And then anxiety, oh my goodness, so many kids deal with this. Young people, even though they're young, it doesn't mean that they don't have to contend with some of the same things that we struggle with as adults. And so I wanted to normalize things that are difficult for young people and to know that it's important to share things with people you love and you trust.
Yeah. Well, first of all, congratulations on all your success so far. It is very, very impressive. And I'm so glad that you joined us here today. It means a lot.
Thank you so much. I love talking to you.
Thanks so much for watching Advocate today. Download the app in the Apple or Google Play Store, stream us live, and you can even subscribe to our YouTube channel. For the Advocate channel, I'm Aaron Dean.